Ladies and gentlemen, please rise as you are able to welcome His Holiness the 17th Karmapa and the official party to the University of Toronto.
I wish to acknowledge this land on which the University of Toronto operates. For thousands of years, it has been the traditional land of the Huron-Wendat, the Seneca, and most recently, the Mississaugas of the Credit River. Today, this meeting place is still home to many Indigenous peoples from across Turtle Island, and we are grateful to have the opportunity to work on this land. Please be seated. Your Holiness, honored guests, colleagues, students, staff, and friends of the University of Toronto, my name is Professor John Robinson, and I have the great privilege as President Merrick Gertler's Special Advisor on the Environment, Climate Change, and Sustainability to welcome you all today to a very special address by His Holiness the 17th Karmapa on mindfulness and environmental responsibility. Your Holiness, we are most proud to host you in Convocation Hall this afternoon and deeply honored that you have chosen to visit the University of Toronto on your first official tour of Canada. We have much to learn from your wisdom and your compassion. And on a more personal note, I would like to point out that the environment and sustainability field is dominated by voices from science and technology. These are, of course, crucial contributors to the questions at hand. We need good science, we need appropriate technology, but it is also important to recognize that all sustainability issues raise profound ethical, philosophical, and spiritual questions. There is therefore a pressing need for more exploration of such issues, and I welcome His Holiness's actions and contributions in this area and very much look forward to his remarks today. Before calling on my colleague, Professor Francis Garrett, to introduce His Holiness, I'd like to share the following program update. His Holiness has very graciously agreed to participate in a brief question and answer period at the conclusion of his address, and I will serve as moderator. We will have 2 microphones placed on the floor, on the aisles on the ground level, where you're invited to form a queue after the address. If you're on another level of the room, please feel free to come down and join this line at the appropriate time. We are indeed privileged that in its inaugural year, the Robert H. N. Ho Family Foundation Center for Buddhist Studies is able to welcome His Holiness to the University of Toronto. Now I would like to call upon the Center's Director, Professor Francis Garrett, to introduce our most distinguished guest. Francis.
Thank you, Professor Robinson. I'm delighted and truly honored to stand here today in the presence of His Holiness the 17th Gilwang Karmapa Orgyen Trinley Dorje on the occasion of his first visit to Canada. As the head of the Karma Kagyu tradition of Tibetan Buddhism, His Holiness has demonstrated exceptional world leadership in some of the most pressing issues of the day. He has established several important projects focused on digitizing and cataloging Buddhist texts, which are a critical vehicle for the preservation and dissemination of Buddhist scholarship, language, and culture. He has championed equal rights and opportunities for women, working in particular to restore full ordination for Tibetan nuns. His Holiness is himself a painter and sculptor, as well as a talented poet and author. I hope that we might in the future invite His Holiness to tell us a bit about some of these exciting projects and initiatives should he visit Canada again. But today, we're here to talk with His Holiness about his work with the environment. His Holiness was the founder in 2009 of an initiative called Koryuk, which brought together Buddhist monasteries and nunneries that commit to protect the Himalayan region from environmental degradation. The network organizes conferences and training workshops, educating participants on environmental issues, and enabling practical projects such as solar installations, rainwater harvesting, vegetarianism, sustainable farming, waste management, wildlife protection, and more. Inspired by His Holiness's strong leadership, Buddhist monasteries across the Himalayas have begun partnering with NGOs and local communities on environmental issues. And this network has resulted in a transformation of practice and thinking that can be a powerful example for all of us wishing to effect such change. We could spend a week together learning more about each of these important initiatives, but our time today is precious. So now I'd like to ask you to join me in welcoming His Holiness the 17th Gyalwang Karmapa to the University of Toronto.
Thank you so much. Even though I know a little bit English, a little bit, but I prefer to use translator. He's all the way from America. Maybe it's not so far away. And today, and Ashwada, Toronto University, Kashwada, Kokabchomade, Susueki, Kashwada, CG, Ruji. Sanandando, gave us some in Sunday. Sona, you go to Danger Sanan as you gave lab day, professor, faculty, the Danishing Shimjuba, and Lomada, and Dana Danes of Samaria, Jashimidushai.
It is a great pleasure for me to have received this opportunity to be together with all of you at the University of Toronto. This is indeed a very uplifting moment for me, an instance that I consider to be one of great fortune. And so to begin, I would simply like to offer my warm-hearted greetings to all of the professors, faculty, researchers, and students of the university, and everyone gathered here. Greetings to you all.
And today, Canada ya yom tin tambre, and the tin tambre Thoma to stop just the and the Toronto Tonke, the Zidu Dembe Tonke, Dinalia. Kokabchum the Kabashachum and the Toronto Tonke the Kanda Naso, she Miri Naminas Mangushuji, then Zomche and the Zombatu Masevegi, Chorchini, Mirisu Susuki, and the Chur in a rejection in a Tidila Pinsu, Chikitilia, Kukurtan. Sutong Yue Tone, Nyamdo, De Sone, Chak, Nijiki, Kachureda, Tonke, Mise Chadiore. Trini Dusane, 베나디나로레 아주 표지 장보 다 장아미르게 나오는 장보 마슈지 차리가래 드린 구수이 비네 대야지 저今年 수수육 최대兄弟 지 가로에 송교 치아기 이제기 고급 여버서는 와서 양 다나 신기 현다 초다 냠도 지 소화계제 이기 소화계제 대하여 봐 드시면에 드린 주산에 디기 총견대당 이 총견당 미만 상으로래 정말 gratitude senanda도 가진제를 도슈아이
This is my first visit to Canada, and the first stop on this visit to Canada is here in this beautiful city of Toronto. I'm delighted to have this opportunity to visit this beautiful city where there is so much richness of diversity, where so many different types of people from different types of backgrounds gather together. But not only gather together and coexist, they gather together and flourish in an environment of mutual respect, where everyone's culture is appreciated and respected, and where everyone from all of these different backgrounds can live together in an environment of well-being. Therefore, I think that these qualities make Toronto a very special city. And from within this wide array of diversity, we of course have the Tibetan community of Toronto, which is Canada's largest Tibetan community in any Canadian city. This concentration of Tibetan people, on the one hand, provides the Tibetan community with an enhanced opportunity to protect and sustain its own unique spiritual and cultural traditions. But not only that, it affords the Tibetan people who live here with the opportunity to share their cultural richness with others and to learn from the cultures of many other peoples as well. So therefore, I'd like to begin simply by honoring this city and honoring the people of Toronto.
political thone chepsi thone nare andana singi dayanji samsam yaji shulu ge thone nare de thone chi ya kebaru chi azu chi karu yewaru chi samsam azu chi mabu chi ondi yara miji je de thone ta yimi de When is it one? Tang Azuchi, long chess egg, curious and antando. Yanaji Jung curious and antando. Ting when a shabby. Tang Azu Samology, Jay Beji, Yawa Meva. Titon shabby, and the Katre. Masamolo Takadaji, Sejibu, Seji, Takatre. 리부 지간을야 냠도 손에 실 대대치 다는 정 아주 상월로 편수직 질이야 엔지 가르다지 지글 직대님 잡아 사모스는 장도 야나 지글 지 편수 디루 대화도 동에 지글 직대님 체세 그래지 초대하지 우리 수도 차려야 해 근데 인주산에 이 유전되네 삼성지 크루기 고리아 도나만 못 채요 주산에 아니 신이 나서 성로 오늘지 서시지 가면야 서시지 가면야 손에 대체되게 찍고 있다 안 다른 신 편수지기 질이야 안다 지 가져다 아이디에 좀 뭐 소외 토리야 편수지기 질이야 해내고 저 같이 연구 여러분들 그걸이야 돈안 채버들 때에 만지 셔도요 아니 지금 안 다직 세로도 알아보지 그래서 영어도 삼죠
Generally speaking, in the world, we divide ourselves into many different groups, whether that be on the basis of politics, on the basis of spirituality or religion, on the basis of ethnicity, and many other ways of categorizing ourselves. There are all kinds of different groups and factions that we put ourselves into. But if we look at what's really going on from the perspective of the reality of things and from the perspective of the environment, none of these distinctions or divisions that we make amongst ourselves are truly real. From the perspective of the environment itself, from the perspective of our true reality, it is a reality that all of us share. We are all living together on one single planet. And in this situation, we all depend on one another and share many profound connections. The reality of our situation is that both our happiness and our suffering depend upon each other. We are constantly in a situation of mutual dependence. And I think that this increased attention that we see being paid to the environment in particular is an excellent opportunity for us to realize this reality of interconnectedness that we share. I think that when we pay attention to the state of the environment, that this attentiveness will make our interconnected reality clearer and clearer.
Oh, okay. That's interesting. That's dance heavy, no? On that, she yegi, kuyu tolia, gave to one. But in the Jersey kuyu and Javachadi, you stand it. That Tomadilia, I gave to one Chikulia and Javachadi, Kolia Jishui. That day, now. 딱 얘기해서는 회기 사자 구교를 제 나다는 이제 로베기 김산 이렇게 세상 안다지 말이야다지 로베기 안다지 롱 야차마 베징리야 지 수균의 로베 소화 계단 텔레야지 냠용사 고급 상급이지 다로 계획이 손다 로드임버지 음료사 고급 충분해. 이 디균센데네 지게 무엇을 제정중 구요리아. 그래 타니벽이 안지 소화계시 된 요격 인상 디존에 셰비다 내추럴 뷰티 세나다도. 정중기 제도 세나다도. 다른 시 정중 구요사데 무엇을 소소도 소화리아. 소화물이야. 제가 컨디스 챙기고. 팬을 컨디션이고요. 소문을 받아. 어디 냠스냐고 그거를 충분해. 드니 뉴스단에 따디 이상 총계나는 살아 용게 마부지기 딘디지 고급지 네 고급대 받은 용어 중요하다 선정 저 딘디지 고급 충분히 인자 대준선 때에 총뒤내지 마치 뒤급이야 아주 그 고유사 시제로 근데 개요만 고유고 시제랑 아니 남샤도 이렇게 신경만但也每年在这个超定三不几冲突的学位上第九三点呢按照这会有道理啊就同样起来的两个人程序起来了这是用过就是做的啊冲突的那这个区别高级那错这个点呢就没去
Since we're here to discuss in large part the environment, I think it would be beneficial for me to share a little bit about how I personally developed a connection with this topic. I think it relates for me back to my childhood days. I was born in a remote area of eastern Tibet to a nomadic family who lived the traditional Tibetan nomadic lifestyle. And I lived in this environment for the first 7 years of my life. I think that this situation afforded me a wonderful opportunity to gather experience in relation to a very pristine and beautiful natural environment. Through the situation of my family, I was able to witness firsthand the traditional way of making a relationship with the environment and living a sustainable lifestyle in relation to the environment. I also got to witness firsthand the interdependent connection between human beings and the environment, the ways in which human beings can benefit or harm the environment. So even though there was no such terminology as environmental awareness or environmental sustainability and so forth in the area where I grew up or in my family and so forth, the reality of those concerns was very much present. And the depth of affection for the environment in myself was very strong. And I think that this is really the main basis for my present day concern about the environment and environmental sustainability. I think it can all be traced back to the earliest experiences of my life.
Global issue to study on this channel. As a Turumi Zazi as you draw me Karu Chase, the Kangi Cheshires and other challenge Cheshire with the Res Lavina, who will need the Res Lavina Paje, Jidia, Charlie on. The name you stand as you Kuyu Toliachi, and a Kuyu the Deveki, Tsiri down. And Sinki and a Lagze, Jig Lagze. Tamangusi on the order. Take some to my Sebegi, Mazulia, the Jig Siri, the Lazeti, Guadi, catch of Chadi order, Siri. That is some to my Sebegi, Mazula Tanduina, the Jig Siri, the Javage, philosophy. Tanashin City the Jevek, Langdorki, Kashuchi, Sudim, Senantando. Yanachi, Gulon Chekyo, Gulon, 개단들이 계속 시작 차대기 와서 선택도 가르슬라는 미망부치기 대사지 체리베게 지tumde 심주고 tum데다 다는 신기 데이터를 계속 되어 있는 미망부치기 시제를 붙이다 다는 신 knowledge 서머버다지 다디 지 레벨나로야 지 understand 차르지 대삼이 붙이 뭐지 차마도베 무슨디 아주 소수 초야 나로야 지 라렌다 직당 참이 미소소소긴 게임 kur지 제과하신 붙이 전화게 하디 이 information 지급 가지 연구해야 되지 자세히
Lasso. In our current era, I think that the environment is truly a global issue. Environmental sustainability has really become the greatest challenge that humanity faces in the 21st century. I think you could really genuinely say this. And because of this, there are wonderful scientific advancements that are occurring, tracking all kinds of very precise and wide-ranging information about the environment. And in connection with that, science has developed many new tools through which we can learn about and help our environment, and these are all indeed very important. But it's not only the scientific knowledge and the tools that are important. In connection with the scientific insights, I think it is also very important to develop a clear philosophy and also a clear sense of moral ethics, a clear knowledge of what would be beneficial for us to do and what would be beneficial for us to refrain from doing. And it's important for us to merge this philosophical view and ethics with the scientific knowledge that we gain. Because I think that the scientific knowledge all by itself is not really enough to change people's minds and to change people's actions. The knowledge is important, but knowledge alone tends to stay in the brain. Knowledge alone does not tend to change people's behavior in a practical way or encourage people to really assume for themselves a sense of personal responsibility. So I think it's important for us to use the scientific knowledge and the tools that are available, not just as methods of gaining and holding information, but to go to the next steps of changing our practical actions, as well as our sense of responsibility.
Great knowledge, scientific knowledge, tesuda. 다는 신기 아주 traditionally 가서다지 점리 사스카스칼이야지 배 너럽기 지 쿠유단 배 가서다지 튠비기 세난다 쿠유단 제베기 philosophy 세난다도 야나지 대시 philosophy 시샤톤 story 인데 amazing story 인데 망고시다요 언니가래 디게디라 다는 신기 spiritual tradition도 망고시지 언니게 빈주스다네 대수기 안다지 가서다 motivation 세난다도 야나 mindfulness 세난다도 되게 상으로 bring it together 상으로 냠도 주 아주지 숨도 주베 토안 아주 냠도 지금 내가 체제 아니 쭉 냠도 야과 자위미나 아니 신의 지가 주지 주어디 지가라 지구유 sustainable lives and adado energy brings them more 가서다지 주어 수신을 필요하지 아무래지 야면은 가서다지 healthy som으로다지 대상기 주어 수신부지 용도야지 얘들이 다 optimistic som으로 라와스는 다도 야나들이 가서다지 이제 전부 용도 없어.
Nasa? So to bring about this change in behavior and change in our own personal sense of responsibility, it's not only the scientific knowledge that's important, but there are also various forms of traditional knowledge and practices that we can draw upon. There are many amazing stories through the ages in various cultural settings that provide excellent examples of enlightened ways that human beings can relate to the environment. And furthermore, there are many teachings and practices outlined in the various spiritual traditions of the world that are instructive as to how we can relate to the environment in a beneficial way. And I think it's important to rely on all of these resources to help transform our motivation, to help us become more mindful. If we bring all of these resources together, the scientific disciplines, cultural traditions, spiritual wisdom, and if all of the representatives of these various fields can really come together and pool our efforts, then I think there's great hope for a genuine, major series of changes to take place that will really bring about a more healthy environment and a healthy relationship to the environment. So as to this possibility, I feel very optimistic and confident that we can do this.
그런데 mindfulness 레벨상 즉 저마다 시신사한테 미망 등상 다지 참에 즉 도난 사바지 용대 아직 이런 토픽을 차려. 미망 어찌게 즉 mindfulness 레벨상은 저도 즉 소소된 저와에 되버시. 하나 즉 소소 숨겹지 않다고 야나 가수라다지 소소 지비기 다지 awareness 도 용하지 소소 걸 awareness 용하는 것들이 지금 뭐지 증거하래 이미나 아주 mindfulness 아디 대점 뭐인가 mindfulness 주사네 소소 걸 지보 뭐인가 랑다 지심제시에 다는 신기 랑도 구유 디버를 잡아 간지 용이와 대대 편지 가수라다지 띵사벽이 가수라다지 잡아 간지 용이와 디더라지 awareness 잠바의 시신 som다지 체시 와 다디 가수라다지 mindfulness 아디 야세선에 understand 제과리 계시므로 있습니다.
As to mindfulness, as I think we would all agree, there is a lot of new attention these days being paid to the topic of mindfulness. But I think it's important for us to be clear about what mindfulness practice actually is. I think that there sometimes can be an assumption on the part of many people that mindfulness is mostly to do with being aware of oneself, and being aware of oneself only. Perhaps some people have the impression that mindfulness is connected with the notion of self-preservation or self-protection. But mindfulness is actually much more than that. Mindfulness is not only about being aware of oneself. Mindfulness is about being aware of oneself as well as other sentient beings. Not only does mindfulness include other sentient beings, but it also includes one's own environment and the relationship that one has with one's own environment. Mindfulness has a lot to do with acquainting oneself with the profound connection that one shares with one's environment, deepening and promoting that awareness as well. So it's very important for us to develop this more expansive understanding of what mindfulness is.
Science dan dana shingi, technology dan dana shingi, karshurada philosophy dan and motivation dan mangbuji achuji sha yore. Da yimene zo de da tamadliya miso sugi da ji choice marwa da ji dangwa chiaji taju chiaji denis de yanga chum shu cha yore. Miso sugi dangwa da taju majuna and the Sangolo Yanjik knowledge to which subject to Madobe, object to charter at Kalahamwa,
Lassa?
Shizal to Madoji, Shiziki, Karvadaji, Kora Namjer, Rodu, the Karvada, Zetuanti, the Casa Soso Jaleo, and the Indusane, Tikun Zendene. Mindfulness la dusane sosugi kaza ger sosugi an kuyulia energy karro tobo sanadado kuyulia ji karro nögön sanada karro daji penyo kdi yeba dana singi ane susugi gengur kandis lengo yeba ti tolia ji susulia kali training chada understanding your Adam. This chadi mindfulness study, this quality catch me study.
Lasso? As was alluded to before, there are all kinds of approaches that we can take to the topic of the environment. There's the scientific perspective, the technological perspective, the philosophical perspective, the perspective of our own motivation, and so on. Many different areas and angles that we can explore. But at the end of the day, I think what it all comes down to is each individual's personal choices. The choices that each of us makes in relation to the environment. That's really the key, crucial point. So, at the end of the day, it depends on the choices we make on the basis of our own knowledge and our own intelligence. And that is where mindfulness practice comes in. As it applies to the environment, mindfulness practice is about looking deeply into the effect that our own choices and actions have on our environment and the degree of benefit or harm that they create in relation to the environment. when we become more deeply aware of this benefit or harm that we create for the environment by our own choices and our own actions, and we train in adopting this type of attentiveness, then I think we're practicing a form of mindfulness that is very important for our current era.
Specialist watching as a share in
Lasso?
Then did some long as you some gain young good chawach, as some eggy. As you could shoot gain. Jayore, then the interesting gain young good chawach, the chariot.
And therefore, this sense of developing responsibility becomes very important. Responsibility in relation to the environment is something we all need to develop and is a burden, so to speak, that we all need to carry. And we come to carry this through recognizing that all of us and each of us have an impact on the environment. We all influence the environment. And so therefore, the notion of responsibility in relation to the environment isn't just something for the experts. So these days, there can be a tendency, I think, to assume that the experts will take care of it. And so we can leave the main decisions and so forth to the environmental experts. But it's not like that. Each of us has an impact, and so therefore the responsibility is something that we all need to assume together.
And Labadu Chikashwe Kuyugi DJ Kangya Chewa Jumze Zawaduti Kawa Tuyarisana Zodi Ajum the human greed Senadado Dramigi Dangam Televasi Rale or something. Natsuki Devati Jumomba Meva Senara Zonda Mevsi. Ta ine Kashwadaji. Long Chusegi, the natural resource, there is a limitation to Chimbi and the limitation, Sessi and the natural resource, Tigi and Sesame Azu, Devati Kantiadi, Kauship Chadi on it. The understand teachers and then, and Ashwada Azu condition. How to learn some of the controls and Yana, as you develop the control shape, Senadando, Yana G. Balance, make balance of it. That is a consumerism should be on the other. Tinana, Pazotini, sustainable life decades, which are the Dini, balance shading, and the shoulders. That Dinian got two city, greedy Tolia, but it's to the man or something.
Awesome. If we were to ask what is the root of all of the problems we are facing today in relationship to the environment, I think that it all boils down to human greed. As human beings, we seem to have this mindset of desire that is insatiable and inexhaustible. So on the one hand, human desires seem to have no end. It's the capacity of the human mind to keep wanting and wanting seems to be infinite. But on the other hand, from the side of the environment, our natural resources are finite. they do have an end. And so this creates a very difficult situation. It's very difficult for finite natural resources to fulfill the desires of humans, desires that are infinite. And so the question becomes how to bring these two components into balance with each other. Human desire on the one hand, and natural resources on the other. We live in a world where consumerism has a very strong influence. And so, how to balance consumerism with sustainability becomes a big question for us. And I think that to get at this question, we really need to look at our mindset of greed. Lassa?
And these Jelia, Masuji, Garu Churchland Charo, the Shion, and the Industane, she and a Churchland Charo, Chenjumero.
Lassa?
We can start the question answer session.
So I think maybe I'll leave it at that in terms of my introductory remarks, and we have set aside a period for a question and answer that I think it would be nice to go into now.
So as I mentioned earlier, there are two microphones, and if you have a question, we would ask you to line up at the microphones, and we'll alternate between them. I would also ask you to address your questions to the content of the talk. In other words, perhaps we can be mindful of the content of what was presented to us and respond accordingly. Again, if you are sitting up above and would like to participate in the question and answer, please feel free to come down and line up at the microphones as well. And we'll begin over here.
Hello? Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Thank you, Your Holiness, Tushena. I'm a Tibetan. I live in Toronto. And I'm actually writing a story about your visit for one of the national magazines here, Maclean's. So this has been quite an interesting tour so far. I would like to acknowledge, before I begin my question, just very quickly, all the volunteers who have supported and made this event possible, especially the main coordinator, Lama Denzila here. So if you want to bring a round of applause for the volunteers, I think that's amazing. All the tea that was served this morning at the temple, very nice. Yeah, so I have a question on the matter of mindfulness. This morning I had an interaction with the head of the security team, who I think his name is Lawang. I was trying to get a few quotes and interview some people for your visit, and I was threatened of being kicked out of the temple because I was questioning why he was being so hostile towards me. And he also at one point told me that, you know, I'm the boss, I run the show here, and said that he would revoke my pass if I continue to question him and block me from attending all of your future events in Toronto. So I'm curious to know, and I'm not going to ask you to comment on the actions of other adults, right? But on the matter of mindfulness, and especially in the context of your visit and on the location and the environment that is supposed to be about compassion, about joyfulness, auspiciousness, and all of that, how is one supposed to maintain mindfulness in a situation where you're confronted with such level of aggression, hostility, violence, and possessiveness, right? I'm very curious to know that. And secondly, my second question is, I know Your Holiness has a very busy schedule in Canada, but I was wondering if you had set aside any time to speak with Tibetan youth, young people like myself. I believe I'm of the same age as you are. I know there are many different issues that we are dealing with here that are specific to us, so it would be great if Your Holiness has some time to speak with us, or even with me, to discuss the issues that we are facing with. Thank you.
I wonder if I can interpret the question as asking, in a world where mindfulness is not ever present and hostility and opposition exist, how can we best respond in a mindful way?
That mindfulness adi ji khale she de aru chuma impati lalen thole a drogu are lalen thon drogu dustane enji khadui ne ji karura da ji nima ji cha sha bi na a zhe da ji chamba de xi jing ni jia ji zang ji chamba de xi jing ji jawa khale che bi chamba de xi jing se ba ji su su khare che de di 가르쳐다지. 그래서 참석 아주 대용이거든. 니만 인간 차와를 치 내가 먹고 싶지. 아는 딱 공다 삼 던지사는 들이 내가 먹고 싶지. 차와는 사고 싶지. 이내 오늘 저녁에 수수기 가르쳐다지. 딱 오늘 디체비 인사를 이쯤 버릇지다. 야나지 가르쳐다지. 오늘 진짜 진짜 진이 삼삼으로 진짜 지금 무연지 하러 싶다 매대 그러지. 그래서 내를 지금 너무 좋아. 제가 디 교전 때문에 마인드풀니스 하디 지가서야. 조디 프레젠트 소마로 하지. 디지 과디 개집십 차례야지 가서 디기 지 mix the situation that moment situation the 갑자기 니즈디 more clear and 야나지 수술이야 지 뭔지 서브줘야 되겠으나 야나지 가르쳐다지 수술이야 디 제바 가르쳐 수술이 니즈디 제바 세버를 정하지 잘이고 안 다나 신기 지 초신에다 아주 마인드풀니스 지 가르쳐 disturbing motion control charge 주던 거래. 대단하리야. 아니 수수기 지 샘디 다스 지 가서 그랑 강던조지 방법 메인바. 수수기 지 최시를 써야지. 최시 뒤 투비하는 조도미도 지 타나야 아주 최대로 체지. 트라이 체지. 근데지기 아주 이게 게임로지. 게임. 근데지 거야지 계속 샤레서 이제 좀비 신의 가수지 그게 이용 미용으로 대체 특히 제연에서 안 꾸라 걸리 한다고 정답을 태는 거 아주 다 용보쇼 용나 야본도 삼삼지 마다베 다 오늘 저녁에 와 나네 다야 돼 아주 유의차 인가 좀 강했지 아니 고런 주산 매버지 강했지 아니 다 베베기 쉰게 두야디 다른 찍지나 두주 유기래 다다게 인스 지금 투비나 바지 그룹 저지 마도 미래에 일이 투야 깔아 하고 싶다 이제서 라서 다지 그래시
Of course, mindfulness is something that needs to go beyond simply talking about it. It's something that we need to apply in a pragmatic way to our day-to-day lives. Sometimes what happens in our day-to-day life is that we become very busy with all kinds of activities. And we might look back on the activities of a given day at the end of the day and think to ourselves, I was really busy today, running to and fro, doing all kinds of different things, but at the same time, I don't really have a satisfying sense of this is what I did today, or this is what I accomplished today. And sometimes we even have difficulty recalling to ourselves what precisely we did during that day, even though our day was so consumed with activity. But mindfulness, on the other hand, is about being present to our actions and acknowledging our actions while we are engaged in them. This makes our relationship with our day-to-day activities more clear, and it helps us appreciate our day-to-day lives more. It makes the relationship between ourselves and our day-to-day environment more clear. And then, of course, another aspect of practicing mindfulness is relating to our emotions, and in particular, our challenging emotions or disturbing emotions, bringing them under control. So therefore, a big part of mindfulness is not simply letting our minds follow whatever pattern of thought they want to follow, but instead watching our minds very carefully, embracing our thoughts and emotional movements with attention, attentiveness. And it's a practice. It's something that we simply need to give it a try and see how it goes. I think it's important for us to take a playful approach to mindfulness and sometimes approach mindfulness in some ways that are similar to a game. Seeing what kind of effects our mindfulness practice has in our experience, and seeing if we can't develop some more increased clarity of understanding in terms of our day-to-day actions and so forth. So mindfulness is something we need to practice directly. We need to directly give it a try. It's not enough to simply say, may it happen, or hope that it will happen, or think to ourselves, it would be good if I were to be more mindful. But it's something we need to directly put into practice. And some of this can be in a playful way. And then as to the second question about meeting with Tibetan youth, I think that might be a possibility, and I will look into my schedule to see what is possible. But I think if a meeting happens, the best way to do it would be to have some type of group meeting rather than a series of meetings with individuals.
Excellent.
Hello, Your Holiness. Thank you so much for coming to Toronto and reminding us of what a great city this is. It's an honor to be standing here in front of you. My question is for people that are unfortunately running through too much fear-based thinking. Is there any simple advice that you could give somebody to get out of that headspace?
Jikjagla tembe samno de komshi champochagi ore. Te komshi ta jikjagla tembe komshi de shigya ki tapse. Yangmena suru tangi tapse kare yore.
Okay. Jikja. 가능하다? 나는 유지 직자리 가르쳐라. 난 지금 직자리 개발요, 봐. 직자 개발. 이 유산에 에너지. 다디 개발의 맛이나 안디 apply 해야 되는 즉 가서다지 년보대야 소문에다 다디 디스칼라 가버스도 봐. 배는 아주 춘춘거리야 이제 직자기 미세배는 직자기 가르쳐다지 박자스는 라도 야나다지 믹스에기 고라야지 박자로 가르쳐주네 양지 삼삼 지 된제지 현안사로 된 김샘 믹스에 시야내리네 그런 신기 직시다고 전화로지 용대하고 이제 박자로 이제 다시 용대도 또 이내 소디 직다요 김샘이 나랑 도사 냠뇨체미나 셈리야 미세기지 댄서스네 라도 야나 가르쳐다지 갓덴지 셈리야 갓댄서지 근데지 쇼쳐버리지 예비나 아니 지금 직다 손한테 유용돼야지 다 근데 셈리야 대수 계속니다 가다지 나로리야지 internally 될야지 그러다지 strength somewhere positive strength sanan다도 energy sanan다도 가다 리쇼심을 좀 해야입니다 아니 전신기 고라지 심 동바산랑도 야나지 갑된 매버지 야나 초매바 abolitionist somewhere 되지 용돼야지 되게 민주사네 엔 삼삼 태가르 코란이야 연부 때문에도 비밀이야 초직니 양 코란 좀 튠초네 남상 코란 미든초 남상 봐 더르마도 비네 튠초는 아주 지 가수다 초시에는 제체 되지 겹대서 채비나 펜더로 공부면서 선택했어
라서
남상 좋아할 때에 야고 쉬어야 가라고도
라서 Well, there are many different types and levels of fear, and so it's difficult to give one all-encompassing answer to your question. In relation to different types of fear, there's different types of antidotes that we could apply. For example, sometimes when we are young, we feel certain types of fear where it's unclear what the reason is for the fear that we are experiencing. And I think that some types of this kind of fear simply arise due to the habitual tendencies of our minds. But to share a little bit from my own experience of working with fear, I feel that I have found that if you can find some sense of internal support within your own mind or internally within yourself, some source of strength, some reference inside of yourself that you can return to again and again, that can help reduce the amount of fear that you have or reduce the amount of fear that you suffer from. Some type of positive energy or positive reference point within oneself. If one does not have that, then it might be easier to slip into states where you feel a type of vacuousness inside, or a sense of having no support, a sense where it's difficult to connect with basic well-being. So sometimes it's not possible to face the fear head-on and directly begin reducing it. But to take a different approach, instead of looking at what we're trying to overcome and focusing on that, we could focus on what we're trying to accomplish and try to promote that within ourselves. So sometimes the best way to relate to fear is not to focus on the fear itself, but to focus on gathering more harmonious conditions inside oneself. And that can have a gradual effect of reducing our fear. But again, as I mentioned, it's difficult to have one all-encompassing response to this question.
I'm so pleased that you finally came to Canada since I have chased you around the world in so many other places in order to be in your presence. Welcome to Canada. My question has to do with the fact that, as you know, this is a time when many world leaders, very powerful world leaders, are questioning the very existence of climate change and of any impact at all that humans might have on the sustainability of our environment. This is very difficult for some of us that are aware in our daily lives of the threat that exists, especially when we think of what we are leaving for future generations. I'm also visiting two grandchildren here in Toronto. So my question is, how would you suggest we might best respond beyond mindfulness, for example? Not that I'm putting any, I'm not suggesting that that isn't important, and my daily practice includes looking at this particular aspect of myself and how I impact the people around me. But I'm wondering if you might suggest how we could respond to the current environmental situation, including the political one, that would allow us to have a meaningful, positive impact, get some positive results in the short term.
Thank you.
Thanks, Anki Chapsigi, Nesol de Dos Kalechungsong, Karian Sena. Last.
Okay.
Could the sound person please send His Holiness's voice also through the monitor, because the questions are coming through nice and clear, but His Holiness is not coming through the monitor. So if you could send him through the monitor as well, that would be great.
The Chelsea powerful leaders of the Chelsea and Japan Ming the term watch. I didn't answer my finger. The name is the culture against the standard of Yanajik support which as a young guy. The choosing of some shock charge, shocks and some of this simple standard of this Chicago. Made charge only got it. Time in Chitang Azuki climate change and down to tarnishing the environment degradation have the nature the chamber shoes. Since the me only I kept it, nature chamber shoes in the sun. The immediate effect, some tone at the couple shoes. Tarnishing the nature the chamber shoes in some. 지제 디제를 매듯이 야차다 소소는 중단 치 대인 주산에 소소배 가지고 니드인텔 도련상아 수준 유바다 수수기 가지고 다지 ability 충주시 통해 비슷하네 저 삼성 있으면 잘 알아 제가 디준센테네 초진행 아주기 미게데 미유디 야차서 샤고도 The Lalent Stane logo ne Gojuba, Keshu Shabelos, and Susuki Takan Kashmika Kimzan and Goju Senadado, and the office in Goju Senadado, and that day community changed in Goju. This heavy enough, then the immediate effects are the Bukalik Tonki. Matobe Mazuki Jidang the drawing liberty. Design charity, which immediate effects and down to Donna, Ninga Shumbi, and it's Ninga Pontuaz Mato, Ninga de Har Lucilia. Gachamburjevina, and Hazina Tonto. The Hindustane, he could send Tene, then you bit Chasha, bit Bezushevin, but Julia, 따로 총용나 있는 아주 신의 지대 자지 마도베 아직 연구도 나와니 이제라 프랑스 동네야 총용고를 라비나 아주 미세 디시나게요
Last one.
이네 진짜 잘해도 따이네 tending political leader to chabre dinia for environmental near climate change we need to toria basic bagajwa meba sotya naksu tangtoya meba we need to catch ayo yubisane ti zawani in deny chade kala khabshare sam ina unfortunately kajwa da azu dinje chowa ge ka chikchena twile chai ga hanes
Lasa.
three teachers and then azu 가져다지 줄에 마차 권에 아주 수수지 산에야 덥지 않게 좀 싶어.
Lasa. The chapsi gineso de degarang yemba de deny chi ayo mares.
제 두고 말했어.
Lare.
다시 이 샘제요.
Lare.
내가 배드 지난 시대가 가라 가버렸어. 와. 뭐니 수 에펙션 좀 온디어 봐.
Lare.
네.
Too late machayati.
따이네 미주 야천 보지 마. 램파도 미주 상마. 니 새로 지금도 와.
Lare.
남상 액션 take action 저러 좀 와.
Lasa. So, I think that what you said about the elements of the current political climate is very poignant, and I don't think we need to mention any names, but I think many of us share a feeling of great concern and even feelings of shock and discomfort. But the environment overall is a very vast situation. And sometimes it's harder to see the immediate effects of this situation. And so, in terms of our relationship to the environment, it's also the case that our immediate actions can't have an effect on a vast scale, on the broadest scale. Our actions are limited. And sometimes when we see this, we can feel discouraged. We feel discouraged by our own perceived sense of powerlessness, because we might not be able to effect change on a vast scale due to our limited abilities. But I think the helpful approach to take in relation to this is to keep our awareness focused on the vast, broad perspective, but make our actions, as the saying goes, very local and very immediate. So if we focus our actions on our relationships with our neighbors, on our office environment, on small communities that we are members of, then we will be able to see some immediate effects from those changes that we make. The human brain seems to be wired in a way that it only responds to immediate stimuli and immediate dangers. For example, if a tiger were to pounce right in front of us right now, we would become very scared and try to do something about that situation. But if someone told us, in 2 months, a tiger is going to come and pounce in front of you, then we might not immediately act upon that knowledge. It wouldn't cause us maybe to change our behavior immediately. So our relationship with environmental issues can sometimes be like that. We have the knowledge that things are changing and becoming serious, but sometimes it's difficult to get that knowledge to translate into an action on the immediate level. So, on the other hand, it's important for us to not deny that these problems are real. And it's important for us to not let these problems reach the point where it becomes too late for us to do anything about it.
Thank you for being here with us. It's so good to see you. It's been said that we live in degenerate times, and environmentalists say that some environmentalists say, or many of them, that we're at a kind of tipping point right now. We're very close to it, where the earth is just, at the point of dying, and at a rate that it's not going to be reversible. I know that human beings are capable of many things. We just look around us and see all of the amazing things that people have done, the buildings, going to the moon, all of these incredible feats. And the Buddhist teachings teach us that internally people can change in such a way to become very compassionate and altruistic. I would very much like to know what the Karmapa thinks, what you think, what you foresee for the earth and for human beings in regards to the environment, in regards to if human beings can actually become less greedy and more concerned about taking care of this earth and really coming together to do that.
The Ishinobugi, the Maumba Kandis, Lasam. Lasam? All right. The Karisigi Ore. So, greed, Yungutayaki, that Gokap, Nune Yorebe, that Yong Tube Sarabe. Tenengatsogi, Tene Koryukti, Nune, that Gabyaki Rewa, Yorebe, Maumba. Maumbala, Kandis Chasare.
Pera Chashavin Tati Penangandu Sim Chundu and that was a Pele, Robena, Salo Chuminza, and Robegi, Sabje, Keshu Jiti, Shad Chani.
That's all.
Imagine that you Pevegi, Kasuji, Kala, as a Gaja, do you Tambadi? But do you get you the shy making a man? Shaman again, that Gazu, that is not this marvelous dance, she says, Mother Chan, and Pepper, very color, knowledge, Tamidam, Jidam Mambu's fly or a team in the margin shadow to be picking up. Cezan, shall cover share. Cezan, that is the greed of Jiva, Sally at the house, Chicasra. Love some of that.
Lasa.
Then Daddy cheers that a yarlin Shajev, Gender, Lodges Drew. Cezan mean dig, during the sometime Tambuji Shalia, Bay Miss Gavievich, Shaman and dead little things. And collegially to change child, that Angie Kara, Shas. Tone is done, Loma de Chade. That the legit for change of China, the young allergic change, don't do some those. That chicken needs some time, and a chicken time they just excuse.
Lasa.
Maybe we need to make decisions, some of the lot of children.
Lasa.
Encourage.
Lare.
Indo.
Lare.
That is all the Ningdom Sadi. Mazur Ningdom never Marasato, Ningdom Delia, she Kashwezi, gain of chi. Gain Chubimina, and she needs Ningdom, the Kokashwadaji, compared to the Archita. And you were checked to Hachi. You were a subject. Cezang as you can gain squad, chi gain, not monkey gain, a chi gain understand. Inspired by somebody or that is somebody's me environment, some environment cranky inspired chair. The other thing is to do less of the simply inspired chair. And understand me, I to draw me because good just inspired chair. Not so young. I just so getting an inspired chair today on the other. Just a teacher said then. That is so the just so Tonang, you magic. Interest them and child window something of those. Why honest?
Lassa? Lassa?
Around the ditch also, they want those.
Lassa?
Under Chatus. You know, Mimawachiki is Susuki comfort, some of Mimawachiki, comfortable child, mother Chiki, Duata, uncomfortable Yorwa.
Larry?
Teach Sunday, but you some other something. Duatan uncomfortable child.
Larry?
The need was done that Mimawachiki Namjugi, Kumsi, Karayabinati, Kumsi Bati, or Socialiati. Kumdi chat in that it, Dabdewa, Lelawa, Dana Sinki, Tirichado, Kushi Sava, Jurikana, Ladi, Kushi, in but the part torn that it's painful, that hardship, that you know.
Larry? Lassa?
This and do some.
Lassa?
We need me more encourage someone in
Lassa? Tenen gawa tamde ma say love. You should know Barangi, Narangi.
I ain't here to shoot it.
Lassa.
I get them also.
Lassa. Well, I'll start with a specific example in response to your question. As I mentioned before, I was born into a nomadic family and lived a nomadic lifestyle for the first several years of my life. And in that lifestyle, and indeed in the larger Tibetan culture, meat is a very important dietary staple. And so you could say that 70 to 80% of our foods had some meat in them, and maybe even only 10% of the foods had no meat. These days, we're trying to increase that percentage of dishes that have no meat in them. There's actually a lot of Tibetan dishes that have no meat, but in terms of cultural habits, Tibetans, generally speaking, are very fond of meat. So that's always been emphasized historically. And for me personally, not only did I like meat, but you could say I loved meat. But later on, after I came to India and a few years had passed, I came to change my way of thinking about meat and saw many ways in which it is harmful to the environment and so forth. And gradually, through thinking of meat in different ways, I began to feel differently about it, so that when I would see meat, there came a time when I began to feel uncomfortable. So this was actually an example of a change that really did take place. But sometimes these changes need time. On the other hand, we can use time as an excuse. At some point, we need to make a decision within ourselves and develop a certain type of decisiveness. And this takes courage. It's not that we don't have courage within us. We do have courage, but this courage needs to be triggered by conditions. So we need to meet with the right conditions to make our courage more powerful, powerful enough that it can inspire us to make change. So we could call it courage, we could call it inspiration, and sometimes this inspiration comes from outer conditions, such as gaining an enhanced appreciation of the qualities of the environment, and outer conditions such as being inspired by animals or being inspired by the excellent conduct of another person. That can inspire us to make change. And sometimes the inspiration can come from inside ourselves as well. So we need to find some type of inspiration to help us make a change and to help us become really passionate about and decisive that we are going to change. And I think that there is truly a hope for the world. There is a hope for the world that is there in this regard. But the problem with change is that it can be uncomfortable. Whatever we're habituated to doing, that's what we're most comfortable doing. And when we try to change that, when we try to replace our old habits with new habits, it's not so comfortable and it's not so easy. It can be painful. And so therefore, we often don't want to make a change for that reason. But the answer in that situation is that we need to develop more courage. And I think there is hope for us to find this.
I see there are more questions, but unfortunately we're out of time, so we're going to have to call the question and answer period to an end. And perhaps appropriately on the last question, James Branch Cabell once said, "An optimist believes we live in the best of all possible worlds, and a pessimist fears this is true." I think what we heard today is it need not be true, that in fact a better world is possible, but it depends on our ability to recognize our role and the things that we can do in that process through a more mindful life. So I'd like to thank you, Your Holiness, very much for participating in this question and answer period. And to draw this very special event to a close, I would like to call upon Barbara Hazelton, PhD candidate in the Robert H. N. Ho Family Foundation Center for Buddhist Studies, to do this honor. Barbara.
So, Your Holiness, I thank you on behalf of everyone in Convocation Hall for your inspiring words of wisdom and compassion this afternoon. They will remain with us, and they will form a part of the institutional memory of the University of Toronto for the years to come. This has been made possible by the enthusiasm, generosity, and support of many individuals and groups. Thank you to all of you who have worked with such joy in planning this event. Our greatest appreciation is extended to His Holiness the 17th Karmapa, noble wish-fulfilling jewel. We have indeed been fortunate to gather together here and thank him for his great kindness in speaking to us on this important topic of the environment. Ladies and gentlemen, some final words of instruction. When asked to rise for the departure of His Holiness, please stand if you are able. And in your place, remain in your place for the departure of the official party, His Holiness and the official party. And once the official party has exited, then everyone please follow. Thank you again for joining us today on this auspicious occasion. All rise.